Now we're going to move on to the question and answer session. And it's my pleasure to introduce Rob Ind, Amanda Winnock and Steve Waterston from the AoC. Steve is going to be taking any policy questions you may have. This is an opportunity to ask questions to Wave 1 providers and learn from the outcomes of curriculum design work on the 2020 T-levels. Can I remind you to please put your question in the chat? This will help us to record all questions and ensure they are all addressed. So I'm just going to turn to Rob first and just ask Rob, Amanda and Steve a very quick introduction, and then we go to the questions with Ian. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? I hope yes. I'm Rob Ind. I'm head of school at Cranford Community College, which is a pretty big mixed inclusive secondary school just near Heathrow. We were a Wave 1 provider and started T-levels in September 2020, doing the education and childcare and the digital production design and development. So we have 2 cohorts of each now in year 1 and year 2, and we'll get our first T-level results very soon for the first cohort going through. They're fairly small cohorts. We had an initial 9 on the digital and 12 on the education, and slightly larger in year 2. And this year we are aiming to launch a number of new T-levels, the science, the business, and with following wind, the healthcare science as well. Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Amanda Winnock, formerly a director of Suffolk New College, which was a mid-size further education college. Digital was one of the areas that I managed, and I introduced the digital T-level and transition programme. I was also part of the wider strategic group for the planning of T-levels across the college, which included construction design, surveying and planning, the introduction of childcare and health and science T-levels.
Hello, I'm Steve Waterston. So I'm the manager of the T-level support programme at the AoC. I also manage the T-level transition programme support at the AoC, and that brings me into contact with Wave 1 providers, Wave 2 providers, Wave 3 providers and Wave 4 providers. So we have a good picture about what's going on nationally. So we're able to supply examples nationally of what's actually occurring, and also have a good relationship with colleagues at DFE. So any questions that we do get today which we can't answer, then I shall be sending them off to DFE so that we do get an answer and get back to you on these ones.
Great, thank you, Steve. Hello, everybody. My name's Ian Landles. I'll be handling the Q&A session for the next 3/4 of an hour or so. We've already had some questions come in from providers who couldn't attend today, so we've got some backups. But I want to go first of all to the chat. Rob, this is for you. Did you run your first cohort of T-levels alongside your BTECs, OCR, etc., level 3s? If so, what are the benefits or issues of doing this in a school?
Okay, so our first 2 T-levels were, if you like, course swaps, if you like. So we delivered the level 3 children's play qualification, both at a double and a single, and we swapped the T-level for the double. So in the year that we began the T-level in 2020, we didn't run the double, we still ran the single, and that, I think, made it viable for us. We knew we had the numbers in advance, and compared to some of the other T-levels, it was probably the closest in terms of content, although it's still different. It had, for example, the work placement elements. So the legacy one did run alongside in a different year group, but no, they didn't compete against each other. It was an exchange. In the IT, we run the Cambridge National at level 3 as a kind of BTEC equivalent, if you like, and we did the same. We ran the double and the single previously, so we swapped the double for the single. Actually, we got a bigger single cohort in the year we introduced the T-level than we'd had previously. So they ran alongside. I suppose the only issue was in terms of ensuring we had enough teaching hours, but and now we've discontinued the double awards in both of those. Does that answer the question?
So sounded pretty good to me there, Rob. Moving on, so we've got quite a few questions coming in now. Probably one for you, Rob and Amanda. How were the work experience placements found?
For us, sorry, it was the strategic and operational leads used the apprenticeship database to approach those employers, as well as any contacts we had through just general employer-led briefs, which we'd started to implement. I'd say they were really valuable to start making inroads with employers. We wrote the briefs based on what we needed and what we felt that employer needed, sent them to the employer. They put their brand on, approved, and then amended the briefs accordingly to send us back to us for us to work on those with the students. But we also used our teams. It's amazing how many staff in the college or a school have partners or friends or relatives who work in various companies and various sectors that you can actually lobby to get an inroad in with those employers. So it was a two-pronged approach. It was marketing strategic as well as operational, using your staff.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amanda. One question I guess everybody will want to know the answer. What was the QA process for those placements? In particular, I'm thinking about any systems that you imported.
Well, we use GrowFar and ProMonitor.
GrowFar and ProMonitor, right, yeah, I had a feeling.
But we worked on a stringent QA process in line with safeguarding as well, because that had to be part of that process.
Okay. Thank you. Question here. We applied to deliver from 2023.
Can we just ask Rob to answer that same question about how he found the placements?
How did we find the placements? I give a politic answer, shall I, Steve? No, I think there was support available, and in terms of the apprenticeships, we were contacted by a number of organisations to support. Honestly, initially in year one, hard work. We joined the local Chamber of Commerce and did a few kind of trade shows there. We did, for the education, it was easy for us. We're a school, so we have existing relationships with, 10 feeder primaries. That was never going to be a problem. So that made it easy for us to devote all of our energy into the digital. This was pandemic time, so lots of the digital companies said that they were going remote, and it was challenging at first. We got to the point where we did a bit of cold calling. It got a lot easier, and actually we had one big one fall through at the airport, and we were able to gradually replace. What somebody suggested to me at one of the networks to go to universities, and they were very good. We got a couple of placements through universities, and into year two, it's been a lot easier. So we've kept all of our existing partners, and we've expanded, and we've even started getting contacted, by companies saying we would like someone. But I think there is support out there, not necessarily at the time that you want it. And we had to be a bit more flexible with our course structure in the first year than perhaps would be ideal for the teachers. But once we had the context, it was about maintaining relationships, showing them our students, getting them well prepared, making them part of the process. So leading into the QA process, I think we didn't have, we're a school, and this was generally unfamiliar for us doing something like this. We've built that process as we've gone along and developed it in line with our partners as well. So now that we have probation visits, we're using some of our HR processes. We got the industry partners to write their own job specs. We kind of made them do that before we agreed to them, which kind of increased their buy-in. And I think they come in and interview the students. And though obviously we have to get all the students the placements, going through that process, that's kind of our beginning work readiness program, is getting them ready for these interviews. And I think that's upped the status of it, the value of it on both sides. Do you want me to?
Sorry, go on, Rob. Sorry, I think.
Well, I just noticed there was a follow-up one from someone on the previous qualifications I could do quite quickly. We didn't offer, we offered the doubles, not the triples. So essentially, we would have had to expand staffing, but in a school, it's a more, I mean, it's a complex relationship with all of the other courses that the IT department deliver. Actually, for the digital, it's we've got we're lucky enough to have an IT computing team with some IT specialists, some computing specialists, and some with a business background as well. So we've kind of shared that expertise with it. But we would have, you know, the number of hours in the T level is bigger even than the A level courses. So we would have had to expand were that necessary. We may do this year.
Brilliant.
Further question for me, before I go back there, we also implemented a work placement officer, but that was in its infancy at the time. Historically, it had been educational childcare that had work placement officers, but with the T levels, we were finding that we needed to employ more of those to build those relationships with employers as well and support the students when on placement. The briefs that I referred to was where you look at your requirements of the qualification and you look at your schemes of work and you develop a brief, a project brief around those skills, and then you identify employers that would use those skills and you get them to check that that project brief is valid and real and meets their needs, their employer skills needs, and then they amend it and they send it back to you with their endorsement and name on it as though they'd written it. Asking employers to write those for you is a big ask on top of everything else, but it does support preparation and building relationships with employers. They also get involved with the assessment of that as well. If that helps and answers that question.
Thank you, Amanda. Steve, I think you want to say something on this.
I had the privilege of 3 or 4 weeks ago visiting a sixth form college in Leeds, who were also a Wave 1 provider, and they had a presentation, and they have an employer engagement person working at the college, and I think that's probably a vital member of staff to have, somebody who oversees employer engagement. But their angle on it was they actually recruited an employer engagement person from the recruitment sector rather than from the education sector. So they actually found that they were able to talk to employers in employer language rather than in education language. And also coming from the recruitment sector, they actually brought quite an extensive list of contacts and so on anyway. So if you are going out to recruitment potentially for somebody in employer engagement, it might be worth thinking about the recruitment sector and recruiting from the recruitment sector more than necessarily just recruiting from somebody with an educational background.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. And actually, while you're here, Steve, I've got a question here, which is probably relevant to you. Do we have confirmation of the defunding of the BTEC and other level 3 courses? Will single double courses qualifications still be funded? What's happening?
That is the $1 million question. I am reliably informed that so currently the DFE are in Purda. So because of local elections that are happening tomorrow, I believe. So the DFE are in Purda. So they are saying that the first overlap list will be published shortly after the Purda is lifted. So it's just needing to, the way Westminster works is they have to then get an announcement slot, and so they're going to be applying for an announcement slot as soon as they come out of Purda from the local elections. So it should be imminent, the overlap list, and that will contain the list of qualifications, childcare, digital, construction, and health and science that will be losing their funding. So it's looking possibly maybe sometime next week or the week after.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Steve. Rob, I'm not sure if you've already answered this, but how did you organise your employer placements? You know, were they weekly, big blocks? How did you go around that?
So it's different for our 2 different T levels. So firstly, for the education, the number of hours are such that we needed a weekly placement, and that was the model that carried over from the level 3 BTEC. So in the first year, they've done a day a week. and in year 2 they've done 2 days a week placement, and that gets us to the hours, and in a way it's simpler. But when we were talking to industry in the digital at the start, and particularly when we were struggling to get placements at the start, they all said to us they want block placements, that they don't want weekly placements. And so we have got now 2 blocks of 4 weeks and 5 weeks in summer. So summer of year 1, once they've done the exams, summer of year 1, and then, if you like, winter time year 2. I think somebody else asked, were we able to pick the times? And again, this is something that's got easier. You know, in year 1, it nearly fits, but where you're desperate to get that extra placement, some companies didn't want exactly that week, and we had to shift it a little bit for them. So the teachers had to manage with, you know, 3/4 of the class in and then 1/4 of the class missing, and we had to manage that. I think as it's become more embedded, it's been easier to go far in advance and say, right, these are the blocks we're looking for. And the 5 and the 4 weeks, I think from the students' point of view, has been brilliant, because they've had 2 different providers, they've had 2 different experiences, because they were alongside us, were waiting for the first one. It built the status of it quite a lot. They were very ready, the digital, when they went to industry placement, whereas the education, I think, the second time round, we've learned that we need to do a little bit more to prepare them, because they were going out pretty much straight away. But that's the way it's worked with our 2 existing T levels, and I imagine that the block placement will be what we use for the other T levels going forward. But education, because of the hours, it just made more sense to do it weekly.
Brilliant. And Amanda, was that the same for your T levels?
For education, you have to do exactly what Rob said. All the colleges are following that model just to fit the hours in. Digital, again, they prefer block placement. Timetabling wise, it does make it awkward when some students are out and some are in, but as you get employers on board, you can start working with them. I think part of the key to that, and I don't know if Rob would agree, is it's getting employers to understand the academic year as well. It's no good ringing up the week before and asking to send some young people on placement. You need to have it organised within your year for the timetabling. And I'd also say, I don't know if currently this is happening, but we had a lot of barriers to placements through insurance issues with employers. And I have to say that the professional bodies are superb at supporting you. British Computer, BCS, Science Council are brilliant if you approach them, and supporting you and the young people to get good placements and be covered at the same time.
Brilliant. Okay. We'll probably move away now from employers, but remember, everybody, if you want some questions, put them in the chat and we'll get back to you after this. Rob, you've been asked, how did you have to develop your own resources, in particular for the digital, or are there already resources available online or from different companies?
Okay, others might answer this better than me. So initially we had to develop our own resources, and we've grown our own as we've gone along. I think that the network was set up. I think there was a little sharing, and I think there might be more available from Pearson now. I don't know the answer to that. What helped us, so we're running a transition program as well, and so we got our whole IT and computing team. Because we're a school, we had quite a big IT team. I think there's 6, 7 staff. We got all of them involved in the planning, and the delivery for the transition was done. So we did a specialist digital transition for 4 hours a week, and we were able to staff that with the same teachers who were teaching the T level. So I think that helped them help them plan backwards at the same time as planning forwards. But they've had to make most of it. Again, they've adapted some of the resources that we've used in the past, and they've taught a lot of courses within that department. They're very experienced. But yeah, there was quite a lot of planning, and I couldn't tell you what's available now. But I guess given now that it's been running for a couple of years, there should be more available, and the networks have been helpful, I think.
Brilliant. Was that the same experience for you there, Amanda?
Yeah, Yeah, the team got together and developed the resources. It was the only way to do it, really, and they did that alongside their existing resources and made them more employer focused and linked the skills to specific sectors within each sector, if I can put it that way.
Yes, one thing we do know that NCFE do have resources available if you are an NCFE provider. And again, please ask us if you're unsure about that, and we'll put you in touch with the NCFE, but you can find them on our Padlet. Okay, moving away then from that, GCSEs. A question came in earlier today about recruiting students who have several GCSEs, but probably have one grade 3 at either maths or English. What was your recruitment strategy or approach for that? Anybody, either Amanda or Rob, could go first on that one.
I looked at well, there was two things here. Are they a progressing student or are they a new student coming in? If they are progressing students and the team felt that it was such a near miss and didn't understand why they'd not achieved their grade 4, grade 5 as required, it may be through nerves or illness, or they had personal stuff going on, they then would be given that chance. It would also depend on sector specific. If it was science, they would have to have their maths. If they came with a grade 3 at maths, there was absolutely no way. If they had a grade 3 at English, they could be considered. So there was some flexibility, but it was mainly on those students who were progressing that we knew well.
Okay. Rob, was that your experience?
Steve can tell you what I'm going to say because I've said it so many times. So this is where schools have a big advantage over colleges. I think in lots of the T-level stuff, that's not the case. And I've had to continually sort of say to people, we're a school, we're a school, we're a school. That's not how it works here, even when people are talking about employer engagement officers and things like that. But in terms of setting entry criteria for the course, we were very confident that we didn't need 2 4s. We looked at the content, the specification, and so they're different for every T level. For the digital, they need at Cranford they need a 5 in maths because we felt the maths content wouldn't support them if they only had a 4, but we'll take a 3. For the education, it's a combined 7. And we back our retakes because our retake results are about 90% over the course of, nearly every student gets it in November. So from the context of our students, and we knew most of our first cohort, they were coming from our school into this pathway, and we were also running a transition program for those who we thought needed an extra year, and so we set the entry criteria accordingly. And I think now looking at new T levels, again, we'll choose it on the basis of discussion with the departments and then with the Academy Trust Board, but bearing in mind that we're an inclusive sixth form, we want to remain inclusive. And so no, I would not say that you have to have 4s in both. I think you have to look at the specific T level and the specific content.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I just ask Rob a follow-up question, and just in terms of, so for the students that you take onto the T level that don't have the 2 grade 4s at GCSE, does it become problematic timetabling then the resits for them?
Well, so the 2, I think if I didn't emphasize, I'd probably take either. So in our that would be the issue, doing 2 resit classes. We resit at 3 hours a week. So doing 2 plus 18 for the T level, I don't think is manageable. But within the transition, we have students doing that. But I think within the T level, we would take a 3 in 1 or the other of English and maths for the education. And in digital, we require the maths to be better. So we take a 3 in the English, so it would only give you 1 to do. Looking now at the business and the science, I suspect we'll end up, the governors have to approve it, but I suspect we'll end up closer to the education model with like a combined 7, so that it's only 1 resit required.
Okay, thank you, Rob. And actually, there's been a follow-up question there, Rob. about the transition program, level 2 transition program. It's a very general question about any advice, but if you can just perhaps very succinctly give us your experience of running that.
So I think that it's been, again, something we were given the flexibility to do what we wanted, and this was one of the big attractions for the T level for me, was this transition program. These students who we didn't have an offer for, who we thought could be level 3 with an extra year. So we embraced that flexibility. Things that I think could be useful. So we timetabled it. We gave every student English and maths. From a timetabling point of view, nearly all of them needed to do the retakes, but it was just too complicated if they didn't. So we ran an onwards English program where we've done that HPQ. So that's half a GCSE, gives them a qualification, but it's also really focused on English, and it allows them to specialise in their particular, you know, specialist T-level area. We've taught them together for most of their timetable. So they do work ready. We have an education and a digital and construction, and we'll have potentially other transition programs running, but we've taught them together for most of the time. So they all do a media level 2 qualification. So they're doing a qualification, and it hits the kind of digital aspects of the framework. And then they do onwards English, onwards maths, and a core specialist kind of 4 hours. And we've done that in different ways. So it worked best in the digital, where it was the same teachers, it was the same team who were planning their own bespoke transition, which was non-qual. It didn't have a qualification, but that was because it was the same people. If it hadn't been, I think taking something off the shelf and making it simpler and then adapting it to hone it more to the T level as you learn it would probably be advisable. Is that succinct enough?
That's perfect. Thank you very much. Amanda, anything to add to that?
Not really. I think with the transition program, your diagnostics is key. Right the way through, you've got to monitor those. You've got to be continually using diagnostics for each aspect of the framework, and track progress against those to ensure the readiness for T levels, with T levels as the goal at the end. And you work backwards, you look at what they need for the T level, and you design your curriculum backwards from there.
Brilliant. And for anybody else thinking about transition, we've just put in the chat a link to the framework for delivery. And if you need any other guidance or help, please get in touch with us and we'll be able to take it further. All right, thank you for that. We're going to move on now about some questions about marketing. Couple of questions, which I think is probably relevant for all 3 people. First of all, probably this is for Steve first. Is there going to be any government campaign to raise the profile of T levels in the coming year?
It's a really good question, Ian. If you speak to people from the Department for Education, they are quite proud of their marketing campaign. And the reason that they're quite proud of the marketing campaign is because adults don't hear about it. So in that respect, they have used social media and targeted to the actual cohort of students themselves. So the DFE are keen to point out that they've used an awful lot of marketing, but it's actually targeted at the actual students. So the fact that parents don't know about it, teachers don't know about it, is a little bit of a problem in terms of these are the people who are potentially helping the students to make decisions. And if your 16-year-olds are anything like my 16-year-old, when I say how was your day at school, I possibly get a monosyllabic grunt of So an idea of, oh, I've just received a marketing email from the DFE talking to me about this T-level transition program. I think possibly there's still a bit of work to do. So the DFE are keen to point out that they do that, but there's possibly work from the providers in sort of raising the awareness in their local area as well as this what the DFE is saying about their sort of targeted media.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And for everybody on this call, our Padlet has connections to how to market particular T-levels and transition programs. But going back to Rob and Amanda, how did you guys sell this to parents back in the day, 2 years ago?
We use social, the college has that, we use social media mainly to parents. We used schools, we, developing packs that could go out to parents. It was a hard sell with parents, but parents were starting to understand it better. But it really was down to the provider, the college, the school, to market it to the parents and have that information ready at open events, evenings, drop it off at schools, all the usual marketing stuff that you actually do. But it is key that you get the parents on board, because the parents aren't on board, you're not likely to get that young person.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, how did you go about that?
So we, to some extent, again, being a school, we had a captive audience where we educated our students and promoted it with our year 11s. We ran an extra parents evening for the year 11 parents. We did a couple of assemblies, and we used some of the materials which have been made available. They put something on a bus stop near us very briefly. But basically we identified the students who we'd known quite well and thought that, they had an interest in these areas, and kind of marketed it to them. In terms of parents, I think schools have a lot of trust with their families. So it wasn't a massive sell, but focusing on the options, we just in time, we got the promise that they would get UCAS points. And so although the T-level itself is something which people might view as quite restrictive in that you're only taking one choice rather than the previous three, they were attracted by the fact that students might well go straight into skilled employment or would retain the possibility of going to university. I think as we've kind of expand our offer, marketing, which again is something that as a school, I don't think we're particularly expert in, is something that we still have to focus on. And I think we might have to do something more this summer if we want to expand in the way we do.
But also the school or college needs to be familiar with the universities that are keen to take T-level students and those courses. That information is available. And I know the AoC certainly has that information. I would have that to hand, because quite often parents of level 3 students want to know what options there are out there in terms of, as well as apprenticeships, traineeships, work, what university choices do they have? And I'm aware that it did get a little bit of bad press historically about universities not taking T-levels, but they are now. So I would have that information to hand when speaking to parents.
Just to build upon that, actually, Ian, I had an event in Birmingham last week where I had 14 or 15 Wave 1 transition programme providers there. And it's quite clear now that the schools are seeing the sort of getting the students in to a particular pathway. So the schools are looking at transition programme T-level, and then so the schools and the colleges, then they're also looking now at trying to link up with their local HEI and sign in progression accords and so on with their own HEI, so that their they're in effect then virtually selling a 6-year degree programme. Because you'll get, if you do the T-level in this place, then you'll get onto this, obviously you've got the choice of different universities, but there is one that will definitely take you, and so they're kind of starting to market and sell that 6-year degree programme.
We also had it was a very illustrative, it wasn't a simple diagram, it was very graphic, very illustrative, showing the T-level route and then the options offered at each stage. And that was very helpful for parents to understand, and we had it for each route right across the board.
Just one other thing maybe for schools that might be helpful. We went, we've got a careers officer here, and he's part of the subject network meetings for careers. So he promoted T-levels via to the careers officers of other local schools. And we also went to the local authority and explained what T-levels were to them so that they could use it through connections and things like that.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Thank you. And for everybody, we put a couple of links in the chat for further guidance on marketing. Quick question, operationally, I guess. Did you deliver your core components in year 1, for example, and then the technicals in year 2, or was it a much more integrated approach?
Wait to see what Amanda says. I don't think anyone went for the more integrated approach that was being pushed. I understand the idea was that they wanted them taught side by side, but practically, if you don't teach core in year 1, you don't give the chance to the students to take both core exams and the employer set project at the same time, which is what they have to do in order to be able to take advantage of any resets. So the only way of structuring it really that makes any sense is to do the core in year 1, rush your employer set project at the end of year 1, even though they'll do it much better in year 2, and then you can do the occupational specialism and they're able to resit separately. And I'll be surprised if anybody's got a different plan, but if they have, I'd love to hear it.
No, we certainly didn't. Exactly what you said. We did the core, we did the skills building, the employer set project and the assessment in year 1, and we did the specialism and the main placement in year 2 with any resets.
Okay, thank you. Going back to transition, seems to have a few questions coming up about that. Do you plan for transition to run alongside the T-level in the various routes you have right from the offset?
I don't quite understand what alongside means.
Well, I'm guessing the question is talking about integration between transition and the T-level, working side by side. Or did you run the T-levels first and then bring in the transition program?
We brought ours in together. And the plan was that towards the end of the transition year, we started using the T-level students with to help and support the transition students and doing joint projects together. That was the plan.
Is that the same for you, Rob?
Yeah, we brought them in together, and as I said before, we brought them in, and I've always seen the transition program as essentially doing the T-level across 3 years. So whilst there was a bit of a planning burden on those departments initially, in many ways it made it easier and made them better at delivery of the T-level, seeing the transition at the same time. And they're all integrated within the structure of the school. They're in, they could potentially be in the same form class, but the transition students don't do anything in a group with the T-level students. But they do things all together, irrespective of what their T-level specialism is.
I think for us it was about wanting the numbers progressing as well from transition to T-level. So what I was meaning towards the end of the first year is the plan was to have a T-level induction at the end of the transition year. So they already had in their heads they were progressing onto T-level automatically, and they weren't finishing one course and starting another in September. We tried to get them to start the T-level at the end of the transition year in the June.
So good practice there is integration of those two programs. Yeah. Okay.
And the
great.
T-level students would then support that induction. That was the plan. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. A question there about specialisms, different specialisms within each T-level. Do you just run one specialism or multiple strands?
We just run one. I think we were clear from the start. To make it viable, we can only. I'd like to think that maybe sometime in the future, potentially in the business, we might be able to sort of run 2 at the same time. But at the moment, we just run one, and that was always the plan, really.
Right. Same for you, Amanda?
Same for us. Yeah.
Same for you. Right. Great.
But
okay.
Probably round 1. You only had 1 or 2 you could run anyway, so you just picked which one and went with that one, and then introduced that in a couple of years' time once you got it sorted.
Brilliant. Thank you. A question here about students who have got caring responsibilities or part-time jobs. How did you deal with their kind of, you know, their circumstances when doing the T-level?
COVID helped because we became very adept at doing what we're doing now, and also using things like Google Classroom and those platforms. We integrated them as we would into any other study program. If they have responsibilities, you've got to be diverse. You've got to give that young person a chance as well. But you were made it very clear to them what the expectations were.
Brilliant. Yep. Rob, same with you.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I think there are some things we do better as a result of the remote teaching that we've all become experienced in. But ultimately, I don't really see how this is different from any other qualification. And in a school, you know, you have lots of pastoral systems as well as SEND support systems in order to try to address the barriers for learning. I mean, I suppose the work placement, the industry placement element of the T-level, particularly the number of hours for education, have made it a little bit more challenging, but actually, really, it's the same systems that we use across the wider school.
Brilliant, thank you. A question about progression now. You're coming to the end of your first T-level. The results, as you say, will be in a couple of months. What are the plans for progression for your students moving away from the T-level?
Well, it would be the same as any other students. You've got your individual learning plan for that student, their targets. Young people change their views. You know, they might want you to go to university in the first year, then think, oh, apprenticeship is a good idea, a high apprenticeship by the time they get to the second year, and you adapt their, you know, their individual learning plan accordingly. But progression is their goal, whatever it is, whether it's into a career, into a job. Sometimes work placements, they get offered a job.
Yeah.
And that's great. So they change. They can go to university anytime. It is what it is. You just have to be adaptable, and your team has to be, and the pastoral support has to be there to support that young person to do that.
Brilliant. Rob, what are you doing in your place?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think it's that different to anything else. We have one girl who's done the digital T-level and will finish as part of the first cohort, and we've had both the industry partners she went to fighting over her. She's been offered 2 different degree apprenticeships, holiday work all the way through. I think maybe 2 or 3 of our students have already been offered employment. I think a couple have already secured degree apprenticeships. I think we've got at least 50% who've got UCAS applications in and conditional offers. So I think we've got a bit of work to do over the next couple of months to just make sure that everybody knows, that we know exactly what everybody's going on to. But it's been similar to other students, and in a way, I think the industry placements, like Amanda said, it's given them more opportunities. I think it's made it more popular moving forward because we do have these few students who have already secured, you know, really good positions and good degree apprenticeships.
That sounds very successful, so well done, Rob. That's great.
Not all, but
okay, throwing it open to anybody else for any other questions before we move on.
I'd make one point.
Sure.
It's just a bit of advice, particularly if you're rural. We were a rural college. Make sure that your student that you match with an employer can actually get to that placement. What we found was that you were matching students to skills and what you thought would be best to the employers, but they may not be able to get to that placement. And it was something that was overlooked by us as a provider, but we soon learned that that became imperative. So it's basically because we're rural, it doesn't happen so much in the cities. But yes, it's just logistics. Can scupper all good plans.
Good point, and probably a good point to finish on. So I'm going to hand back to Tony now. Any more questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get back to you after the event. Thanks a lot.
Okay, well, thank you, Ian, and thank you very much, Rob, Amanda and Steve, for your time this afternoon. Some interesting questions there and some interesting answers as well, so that was good. Okay, so for the next steps, this is important for you all. You should have all had at least two, you should have rather at least 2 meetings before the end of the academic year with your T-level advisor. If you haven't already had a second meeting with your advisor, then they will be in touch with you. Alternatively, if there is a date that suits you, please contact your T-level advisor and you can advise them when it's best for you. So we do want that to happen obviously before the end of the academic year. Second point here in next step is the transition programme. You may be aware that you've received information regarding delivering the T-level transition programme in 2023. So we would ask that you please register for one of the webinars to get further information about the transition programme, as it could influence your decision on whether to offer this or not. The webinar will be delivered by the Association of Colleges, and the event, which is going to be offered twice, so you've got a choice of 2 dates, is either on the Tuesday the 24th of May at 4 p.m. or Thursday the 26th of May at 3 p.m. The links are in the chat, and they were also on the monthly update that was sent to you earlier this week. I would encourage you all to register and perhaps attend one of these sessions. You don't need to attend both, obviously. You might find it interesting, as Rob mentioned, that the transition programme did offer many opportunities, so it may be worth just listening to that webinar to see if it's something you might want to pursue. We would also ask that you would complete the T-level planner survey that we've sent out to you in the past. Some of you have done this and we appreciate that very much, but it is important for us to get your feedback regarding this so that we can make as beneficial as possible all that we're offering to providers. So following the meeting, I will resend the link to you all, and if you could respond, we'd appreciate it very much. It was also in the May update that you received earlier this week. We'd also very much appreciate if you would complete the evaluation of this session today, which is now in the chat. That would be very helpful. Again, this informs how we organise these kind of events moving forward, so we can respond to what you feel is most appropriate and supportive. So whilst you're completing the evaluation, we would just like to draw your attention to the resources available. So as you may know, we have Padlet, an online tool where all the resources are in one place. You can see the QR link on the screen. This includes specifications, newsletters, details of events, and updates from awarding organisations. It's all in one place, so you can share that with your colleagues in your schools, and I think you will find that rather useful. There are also on the government website, there are case studies and guidance resources you'll find, I believe, quite useful. They've been designed by Wave 1 and Wave 2 providers, and there's some information there on curriculum design, sort of pros and cons, different ways of looking at things, and that's well worth following the link on the slide. If you're not already, we would suggest that to remain up to date with the latest developments on T-level, you do go onto the gov.uk website to sign up to the T-level website to get them emailed directly to you. We do also keep copies of the newsletter on Padlet. If you want it directly to you and to know what's going on ahead of time, then these are a useful source. And again, as many of your colleagues can sign up to it as you wish. And finally, a reminder that with regard to MESMA, the T-level planning tool, as Richard mentioned earlier, if you need technical support, then the web address, which is noted there, is worth making a note of to contact. They respond very quickly, and they will help you in the first instance. If after that, if you feel you're still not sure, then of course, by all means, copy in your T-level advisors and we will pursue things on your behalf. So all that remains for me to say is thank you for your participation. Please complete the evaluation form. We look forward to seeing you all in our forthcoming meetings, and may the force be with you. Thank you all very much.